Hi, friends. Today we are delving into some of my favorite topics. We are going to be talking spirituality, personal growth, and inspiring journeys of transformation. And I have the honor of introducing a remarkable guest whose life story is a testament to resilience, self discovery, and the power of love. Her name is Amanda McCoy Flanagan. And she is many things. And she's an author, podcast co host, mother, wife, and lifelong spiritual seeker. She's originally from New York. And now, as you can see in the background, she resides in the beautiful state of Colorado. A big change that we'll talk about in the podcast. She is co founder of a nonprofit organization called Castle Rock Clubhouse, which is a recovery sanctuary, and co host of the Soul Rising podcast with her soul friend, Ginny. She holds a bachelor's degree in English and journalism and a master's degree in social work. And today we are so excited to celebrate the release of her inspirational memoir, Trust Yourself to Be All In, which is quite literally an open book. And her perspective on love, loss, addiction, recovery, spirituality, and healing. There is so much to dig into. So I'm excited to welcome Amanda to the show. Welcome, Amanda.
Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for having me today. This is awesome.
It's a pleasure. No, it's my pleasure. And we were just talking before the show that you were nominated. Could you tell us a little bit about that, or your book was?
Yes, my book was nominated. I'm a finalist of top three finalists in the motivational, inspirational category for the Colorado Independent Publishers Award. It's called the SIPA Evies, is what they call it here in Colorado. So that's a huge honor. I am going up against two other authors, August 31st at an award ceremony. So me and my family, my kids will go. That's what I'm the most excited about, is that my little girls will be.
No, that's amazing. And congratulations. Seriously, that's so exciting. We met recently and it was through, I would say, your energetic footprint via the Instagram algorithm. So that's how I like to think about it. This book has been the culmination of the inner work that you've been doing and continue to do. And your kids are a huge part of it. So I'm sure that all of it coming together in these moments is so special and it's so exciting. So one thing that we have in common, actually, Amanda, is that we both lost our siblings. So you lost your brother, Jeremy. I lost my brother, Joseph. One thing I loved about your energy is that you are such an authentic person. And that has, I learned, come from all of this work that you've done throughout your life. Tell us a little bit about where it all started and what role Jeremy played being the catalyst to this journey.
So I got sober in 2006. I started drinking when I was about 13 years old. My older brother, Jeremy, 3.5 years older than me, started before me, and I kind of followed in his footsteps. He did pass away from an overdose back in 2018. And the question we kick around a lot in the rooms of recovery is why did I stay sober? Why did I have this experience? And he never did. He wasn't able to. It's such an integral part of this whole thing, like you said. But I'll start with my journey a little bit. So getting sober when I was 26, about 8 months into sobriety, I had a boyfriend who passed away. My boyfriend Mike passed away, and that really shook me. That really rocked my world. I didn't drink through it. That's one of the main messages of my book, is that I have had 3 emotional breakdowns in recovery. Not even, I say it not to my knees, but took me straight to the floor, hardcore breakdowns. And I didn't have to drink through any of them, because my recovery program had been so strong, really from day one. It was a divinely inspired, divine intervention sort of experience that happened to me getting sober. Same thing with my book. All these wonderful things that have happened to me in my life are not my doing. That's the beauty of believing in something greater than yourself. And so you're 100% right. Everything that has happened to me has really been done by a force greater than me, not of my own doing. It's been sort of out of desperation, I guess, on my part. And then I sort of a knowing or something would come in and just guide me towards some kind of healing or some kind of epiphany or catharsis or awareness or whatever that has just kind of pushed me, getting into recovery. I was kind of just pushed into that room. I don't even know. I was just kind of led by something else. And then, after Mike passed away and when I was 8 months sober, people showed up for me. I believe I call I call it God, the high power God, the universe. To me, it's just one loving, benevolent force of goodness that is just love. And I think it works for people. And my friends, a couple of my friends who I actually was not that close with showed up, and one of them had said to me, "We don't drink no matter what." And I said,
Ooh,
yes,
I love that.
yes,
Okay.
I want to be a part of that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yes. Oh, and I haven't had, like I said before, I haven't had to drink through any of these emotional, mental, nervous breakdowns, whatever you want to call them. So went on my journey, kept going on my journey, met my husband. We had 2 girls. We got hit hard with Hurricane Sandy. We lived on the South Shore of Long Island in Long Beach, New York. We lived a block off the bay, and the water, the ocean, covered the whole island from beach to bay, like 4 feet of water. It was extremely tragic. And he had just retired from the fire department, FDNY, as a captain. He had some PTSD tied to that experience. And I said, you know what? Maybe we can go somewhere else. And during Hurricane Sandy, I couldn't get in touch with him, and I kind of freaked out. I pulled out a map and I pointed to the middle of the country and I said, Kansas. I don't know if I can get to Kansas. I'm not sure about this New Yorker in Kansas, but I saw Colorado was right next to it. And I was like, I had a friend who just got back from Colorado, and I was like, let's go check it out. So I kind of just knew. It was kind of like a knowing. Just like when I stopped drinking, I just kind of knew it was over. Moving to Colorado, I kind of knew. I didn't know where in Colorado, but I kind of knew we were going to go. So life, went on. Different things happened that I talk about in my book. And then my brother passes away in 2018. And again, I believe that he stepped in to bring some sort of spiritual awakening to me and really just wake me up. And it was done pretty forcefully. I had to have a 2x4 to the face to be like, okay, wake up. You do not have to continue in this generational dysfunction, which is what my book is very much about. And my particular family, and I believe many other families out there, my form of generational dysfunction comes in the message of protect your heart. Don't always go all in. It's always better to love a little less because you're going to get hurt.
Right.
And that was sort of handed down to me indirectly, I believe, through the centuries. And I believe it was to protect me. I believe that my mother, her mother, that, I believe that it was good intention. And I think it's like I say in the book, I think back in the day, when things were really, really hard, maybe you had to just kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps, get through, don't show the emotion, don't feel because you had to survive.
Right.
We don't need that anymore.
It was more of a survivalist mindset. It's very clear that you see your role as that person who has the challenge to break the generational trauma and patterns and things that are not working, not just to heal the past, but also for the generations coming after you. So your daughters and their kids. So you took this on. It's like you say, a lot of your changes have been through something greater than yourself, whether it was Jeremy's 2x4 type of awakening or a more subtle understanding or anything like that. You understood the assignments of what role you play in all of this, and you've taken that bull by the horns and really done some interesting, deep work to heal.
Yeah, I love that you use the word assignment because that's exactly what it feels like, a mission, an assignment. So when I hit that other emotional bottom after Jeremy died, I pushed my husband away. It's essentially what happened. I decided I didn't love him. I decided that it was just purely a decision, a very logical, good decision on my part to marry him. My friends were getting married. They were starting to have babies. I was almost 30. I convinced myself that that was why I married him.
Sure.
And I told him that. I said, I don't think I love you. I don't think I ever loved you. Mind you, I'm 5 months out of Jeremy's passing. I'm in intense
grief. I'm sure had a lot to do with all of the emotions that were coming up and all of these realizations or questions.
And ultimately, it was my pathway to all this healing. I had to feel that. And I, feel terrible about what I put him through, my family through. But it was my vehicle to this greater healing. And it had to be the way that it was. And he says to me that, he said, don't you think your grief might be playing a part in this? And I said, probably. Now, I had 4 other close family members pass away before Jeremy within a span of 3 years, after moving to Colorado. So I had a ton of loss on a ton of trauma. A lot of them 4 out of 5 of them were sudden and unexpected. 2 aunts, my closest cousin died 4 months before Jeremy. And then my mother's cousin, who was just this amazing, amazing woman.
So you're dealing with layers and layers of loss and grief and just all the secondary losses that
and actually I wasn't even dealing with them. I was just kind of okay, I felt relief for some of them. I felt like they had been suffering, like, maybe they're, I believe in the afterlife and I believe that it's glorious and just abundant joy and love and that they're now at peace, but I didn't actually go through the healing that I needed to go through because that loss, right? Like I could believe that, I could trust in that, but it's still affecting me. There's still pain that I have.
Right.
I can't just tell myself that and then just keep marching forward, which is what I did. And then when Jeremy died, it all just blew up. It all, right? It's like, and I'm sure you experienced this too. When you have a major loss, then every other loss after that especially when you're reeling and when you're in it, feels huge, feels crazy and all encompassing. So that's why Jeremy's, I believe, hit me so hard. And I believe, and he's my brother, right? Like I met people who had siblings who passed away and I felt for them and I saw the pain they were in. But just like you could never really grasp that feeling. It's like this soul severing sort of thing, which we're still connected, but it's this thing that feels like it's cut and it's visceral and it feels like this thing is being like pulled out. Like it's just this very odd feeling.
There's a whole person behind the loss. And so when you say some people lost siblings, and I'm highlighting this because I share a similar experience, the sibling relationship can be a little complex because not everybody shares the same type of relationship as you would with, let's say, like a mother or a father, but they were a whole person and they were ripped out from underneath us, and that kickstarts everything else. So this is like an excerpt about who Jeremy was in her life. It says, Jeremy was a boy who buckled my orange life preserver to board our speedboat for a thrilling ride through Zack's Bay, followed by a sun-drenched day at Short Beach. He knew the secret to catching jellyfish barehanded at the end of a rock and the number of steps from our front door at the end of the stoop. Jeremy was the boy on the school bus that I chased after when he left for his first day of kindergarten, sporting his platinum blonde bowl haircut and an infectious smile. Jeremy was the only person who shared completely in my youthful experiences, the highs, the lows, day in and day out, from the laughs around the table as we savored Mom's Italian family tradition of Sunday sauce and meatball to the tears of grief that accompanied the death of our grandparents. So it's just that shared experience, that person that really gets you up to a certain point in your life, or really throughout your whole life, that gets ripped out. What I'm hearing you say is that, yes, there were all these other losses, and this one kickstarted so much of the transformation.
100%. I was going to say, it's almost like losing a limb, because that sibling, that relationship with a sibling, that's your first friend. That's the first person who stares over your little car seat. Well, for me, because he was older, they're over their car seat when they're brought home from the hospital. Like, or the first person that's there, that's not a parent, that you recognize as like you, they're another child,
Right.
baby, they're, and you spend so much time at home when you're so young. A lot of us spend time at home. He's my best friend, and so we had our trials through the years when his addiction pulled up really hardcore, and I would have to like sever ties for a little bit. We weren't speaking at the end. Well, we actually did. I feel very blessed that we came back together right at the end. Like I knew he was going to die. I said to my husband on New Year's Eve of 2018, I said, Jeremy's going to die this year. It wasn't hard to tell. I mean, he was homeless for a couple of years before that, living in his car. And then he wound up dying in this like shack, basically. And he was doing some hardcore drugs. And I just kind of knew. I hadn't even seen a picture of him. I saw a picture of him after he passed away the last time he saw his daughter, my niece. Right. She was 9 when he passed away. That was December. He passed in March. And Jeremy's death like really propelled me on this crazy healing journey. And I believe he's also behind the book. I believe that another divinely inspired moment, running on my treadmill one day after going through 3 years of this healing, this marriage counseling. When I was talking about it, didn't think I loved my husband. We went to marriage counseling because I said, I'm sure my grief is playing a part here. Like I was in recovery long enough to know that there's usually something deeper going on underneath the feeling. So after a few years of healing, I'm running on my treadmill one day and I just feel like I hear, or I just know, you're going to write a book. And I was like, what? I'd been trying to figure out, like my kids were getting a little bit older. I mean, they're still young. They're going into 4th and 6th grade, but I was like trying to figure out what am I going to do? Right. It was during COVID. It was 2021 when this happened. So it was like the end of COVID. So we were e-learners. We were home all year because of my husband's respiratory illness from 9/11. And, we had to take it very seriously. And it was kind of like, what am I going to do? I've been spending a lot of time out in nature, which I believe nature is where we find ourselves. It is where I found myself.
Very healing and has the capacity to hold all of us and whatever we're going through.
Yeah, so beautiful. So it just came out. The story just came out of all that I had. The dots just kept connecting. It's kind of like hindsight's 2020. Like you go through this, and all of a sudden, it's just like one day, like makes sense. Like, oh my gosh, like that's why this happened, and that's why this happened, and some good stuff, some not so great stuff,
Right.
but ultimately it brought me to this massive healing of, like you said, like the breaking chains of this generational dysfunction. And I did it by healing my grief. And my therapist calls it being a good griever. And that was very interesting. That's in the book too. Good griever, learning how to embrace all of life, all the emotions, all the feelings, the love, all of it, and then being able to let it go.
Right.
So bringing it in and letting it go, like a circle, whether that's events, places, people, things, feelings, relationship, whatever it is. Being able to take that in, it's almost like a circle. I almost look at it like a circle, like bring it, embrace it. And then, so that's why the subtitle of the book is, and I just grabbed one to show you guys, Safe to Love and Let Go, because that's the whole deal there is it's about feeling comfortable enough in all of your emotions to embrace them, to be all in with them. Trust yourself to be all in is not necessarily all in with others. You get there, but it's right by being all in with yourself.
And for context, it wasn't just the loss of Jeremy. It wasn't just realizations you had about your marriage and your husband. There was sexual trauma as a child. There was family dysfunction, emotional abandonment, parents' divorce. Like there were so many things that happened throughout your life. So a lot of people deal with just one or don't deal with just one in their entire lifetime. And you had this culmination of many things come together throughout the span of your life that you go into very honestly and very openly in your book. And people don't realize how much it takes just to get through one of those things in life. And, nevertheless, to get through all of them. It's like you say, allow yourself to feel all of it in its fullness as it shows up and transmute that. I believe grief and loss can be an alchemical process of sorts. Trust yourself to be the alchemist of all of that.
Yeah, while I was going through all the pain, I have a good friend who was there through the whole thing. And she said to me, don't waste the pain. And I loved that. And I was going to put it in my book, but I learned it's a title of another book, which I'm going to read. But anyway, it's about, for me, that alchemical process is turning the pain into power within yourself to say, you know what, I got through that, right? It's like all the references. It's saying, okay, I mean, if you could look hard enough, I'm sure everybody out there has gone through something painful,
right?
If you get honest with yourself.
Right.
If you turn over enough rocks and look honestly at your life, you can probably see you did get through something that was painful. And then the next painful thing that comes along, then you say, okay, I had the power, I had the self-love, I had the self-worth, I had the grit, I had whatever it was to get me through that last thing, that I can get through this next thing, right? But you got to go through at least one of those things first to then look back on that, right? So I'm grateful. I mean, I know it might sound crazy. I'm not grateful that my brother's gone, but I am grateful for all the experiences, which I personally believe I signed up for the lessons before I got here, not necessarily how they played out. And I make that clear in my book too. I don't think that I said, all right, I'm willing to learn how to love with the fear of loss or to love through any of that fear. I'm willing to lose my brother for that. No, I don't think that's how it works.
Right.
My brother's soul played a big part in his going and in his path. But I agreed to learn whatever lesson that I have to learn here in whatever way, shape, or form that's going to come to me. And I believe that's why I personally went through, the pain that I've gone through. And I'm sure there's more on the way. I'm only 43 years old. Life is life. It has its ups, it has its downs. Now I trust myself that I can show up for myself and that I will not self-abandon. And I will, I don't even want to say I won't end up a puddle on the floor. I might. I probably will.
And you would embrace that too as part of that process.
Embrace it, loved it, right? I love this whole thing about like sending those scary parts of life or the parts of yourself that like you don't love about yourself, right? This is a little bit of a different topic, but like sending all of that love and light and grace and compassion. And then that for me eliminates the resistance. That's like the antidote to the resistance of going through the pain, is when I'm not putting so much judgment on myself about who I am or how I've showed up in the past or my fear of I'm not going to show up for myself in the future. Just send love and light and visually, right? I use a lot of meditation. Those are like the tools that I use, like visualize that stuff, like see, almost like sometimes I see like myself outside of myself.
Yes.
And then I
do the same. Yes.
and then
Like
like
an observer of your own life.
totally. And then you send it all the love and the light and the peace and all that you've always deserved. Right. And
Right.
I talk about a lot of like inner child work in my book. I was actually just talking to somebody about this yesterday. That's huge. That's huge because little Amanda, whatever she was told about her or whatever, other people's stuff was put on her, because that's really what happens. Right? Our parents and people in our lives, they're unhealed parts, which I give a lot of grace and compassion towards. I don't blame anybody in my book. This is all loving and forgiving and all that. But just for me to be able to like wrap my head around it, I have to understand that we say, right, hurt people, that whole thing, that they could have done better. They probably would have. They did the best with what they've known. And I also say the only difference between me and my ancestors and my mother and my father is that I was born in 1980 and they were born at a time when what I call the evolution of consciousness, and a lot of us are calling it that, wasn't available to them. It just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't
a thing. And they don't have the conversations that are more publicly accepted nowadays, and the internet, social media, all of that has, I think, helped to make it more acceptable and available to a lot of people.
Definitely. We are encouraged to heal now. It's not even like, well, it's just available. Yeah, it is available, but we are encouraged to heal. It's not looked at. The stigma is starting to melt away in terms of going to therapy, addressing your mental health, addressing your addiction, addressing all of these things that are hurting yourself and then hurting the people around you, right? So we are in a massive shift. And, the underlying message of the book is that healing our personal pain can help heal collective pain. Right. Because the whole thing kind of coincided with COVID and everything that was going on in 2020 with the divisiveness over COVID, with the divisiveness over the presidential election in 2020. I mean, and it's still, it's bad. It's, I mean, there is a lot of love and light and there is a lot of goodness in the world. And I'm not like this doomsday person, but like, we're very divided. Like there's a huge division going on and it's a big shift that I believe is necessary. I believe the division and the pain we're in is necessary to bring us to this next phase, just like my own pain was necessary to bring me to the healing.
Would you say the change starts with yourself first? You said can expand from your own change to the collective. I wholeheartedly believe that. We have to change ourselves first, and then that ripples out into our families, friends, community, and so on. Would you say that's the order? Does healing have that type of order?
180,000%. Yes. Okay. It's your energy, right? This is like stuff they've been talking about forever. And I love, like you said, social media is really helping to get this stuff to be more on like a mass scale. Just the education and the awareness and the attraction to it is growing. But it's our unhealed energy, I believe, is creating the chaos in the world. The whole law of attraction thing, the whole what you put out and get back. So if I'm doing that on a personal level, if I'm whatever I'm putting out into the world with my own energy and then I'm getting right back, whether that's good stuff or not good stuff or whatever, why wouldn't that translate to the entire collective? If we're all putting out some fear energy or anxious energy or ego energy or whatever it is, that's what's going to reverberate out there. So yes, we are responsible. And I'm sure some people don't want to hear that. But we're responsible for what's going on out there. It's our behavior. It's our thoughts. It's our feelings that turn into action. Like I said, hurt people. I'm seeing a lot now in people who said healed people heal people. Actually, the first version of my book that I used that word, it was transmuting personal pain into collective healing or something like that. That was like the working title for a minute. So yes, so it's about transmuting your own energy into healing energy. And then of course it just makes sense. And you're going to be kind of happier, more at peace. You're going to be kinder to the people around you. You're going to be kinder to yourself. Once you learn to love yourself, that's like we've been saying this forever. You can't love anybody until you love yourself. Right.
100%. You introduced a concept that I love called boundless expansion. It is the home of exponential, unending growth of mind, body, soul, and spirit, housed within my heart space. It is the amplification of my emotional nature to such an extent that I make room for everything, thought, feeling, and attribute, to commingle peacefully without having to reject any of them. I just love that, because that's really the growth. When somebody says, love yourself, or start with yourself, or heal yourself, that's part of it. The bravery that it and strength that it takes to let things be, take a look at them, and allow them to commingle as if they all lived in a house under one roof and try to get them to get along takes a lot of work. That takes a ton of work. And
Yes.
it ripples out into, everybody else.
And that is why the cover is the cover. That's why you see all the different flowers. Like these
Beautiful.
are wilting, these are like sturdy, these are kind of flowy, black, white, gray, light, dark, all that kind of stuff. That's the point of it. Thank you for reading that. That's the whole thing right there. Like I was saying, like you give love to all these parts, the lovely, the unlovely, whatever, however you want to look at them. I don't like to say good and bad because there's really no bad about us.
It's useful or not useful, or
Yes.
helpful, not helpful.
100%. And then to transform those unuseful parts or unhelpful parts into ones that are serving you and others, there's a process called integration. And that comes from another 12-step program that I'm in. And that deals with dysfunctional families. So that is a process that you look at these things that aren't serving you and aren't serving the world well, and then figuring out, how can I transform them, transmute them, integrate them into myself, into my life, into my heart, to who I am, into this field of beauty that is me, and then they will serve you. Because I believe everything is God-given, right? All these things. And all this stuff that is not serving you, we talk a lot in that program about something called survival traits. And you touched on the word, for survival. A lot of those things are learned behaviors. Most of them were not with you. I'd say none of those unserving behaviors were with you when you were born, when you were just like this little itty bitty baby that was just like love and light and beauty. And like, you look at a baby and you're like, oh my gosh, like just so beautiful. Just like
The blank slate phase. There's not all this complexity to life at that point.
Yeah, it's clean slate. Like you said, this like untainted, like little human that goes out into the world and then gets kind of like all these layers and stuff and other people's stuff and life experience and traumas and pain just get like layered and layered and layered upon you. And the process that you just read is about like kind of shedding those things, but in a beautiful, compassionate, loving way, and saying, okay, I'm shedding them. But what of those things can actually serve me? Which of those things can actually be useful? Because they were there for a reason. They're there for a reason. So instead of like furiously trying to like pluck these things out, like you're pulling a root of like one of the ugly flowers or the weeds, right? I talk about the weeds too in the book, like the weeds and the flowers. Instead of trying to like pluck it out and be like, oh, I don't like that about me, I need to change that, right? How can I do that with like ease and grace and love, right? And that's why I rely on a higher power very often, because left to my own devices, I am a natural self-sabotager. And I don't know if that came from a life lesson I need to learn, or I don't know how that all started, but I know. I mean, I tried drinking a million times on my own before I went to recovery and turned my life and my will over to a God of my own understanding. Sometimes those 12-step programs get like a bad rap. They're like, oh, God, this and, that kind of stuff. But you can make it whatever you want it to be. It's not you. It's just something greater than you that can do for you what you can't do for yourself. So I take that concept and I apply it to every part of my life and changing those flaws into attributes.
Beautifully stated. In reading about your process and all the different things you and your husband tried separately and together, because he did a lot of work, it sounds like, himself as well. What was interesting to me is that you tried what I like to call a soup of different modalities. Like each ingredient is a different modality, and tried a little bit of this and a little bit of that, like EMDR, EFT, RRT, Imago, spirituality, and your belief in God, higher power, source. And you found a way to extract what worked from each modality and make your own soup that helped you get to where you're at and helped essentially restore your marriage and realize that you do love your husband.
What I've come to learn is that my I don't love you was I'm afraid you're going to die. So I
Okay.
didn't really touch on that when we talked about the book. So it was this fear of loss, this unconscious fear of loss that I had no idea, back to the generational dysfunctional message of
Right.
always protect your heart because pain is coming. That was compounded, like you said, through different events that happened throughout my life, starting in childhood with sexual traumas, and then my father cheating on my mother, and like all this, and my mother's breast cancer that we never healed from or even talked about much, how we felt, just a whole bunch. My grandparents passing, it was kind of just like we never really talked, we didn't know how to heal. So a lot of that stuff was compounded. So when my brother died, the great myth, I call it, the great myth became true. My mother's right. Everybody leaves. Everybody hurts me. Well, everybody does die at some point, but everybody's going to die. And in my brain, unconsciously, I said, Jim, that's my husband, he's next. So I'm just going to grieve him now. I'm just going to get it over with now because I don't ever want to feel that pain again. I mean, after Jeremy died, I'm sure you know, I think it was about 3 months of straight, like laying in bed, crying, taking a bath, and going to my recovery meetings. And that was it. He took care of everything. The kids were little. They were like 4 and 6. Like, it was a lot for him. And I was just down for the count. But so when we went to therapy, and then I unraveled this whole story, this narrative that I had been telling myself, so we did the marriage counseling. We did individual counseling on our own. He started EMDR. That's what he did. That was the first thing. He'd been in talk therapy for his PTSD for a while. And so cool how we're learning now that reliving trauma does not heal trauma. It actually makes it worse. And that trauma is healed by rewiring of your neural pathways. And it has to happen in the brain physiologically. It's not, there's really no thinking your way through healing trauma.
I am constantly fascinated by how much of healing is physical. Even the emotional and mental healing is physical first.
It's really wild. Like you said, he and I wouldn't be together. I'm sure you'll see my wedding ring. We're still married. We wouldn't be together unless he did his work, because his PTSD before even Jeremy died, it started about 2016. It started to get 9/11. I mean, he was a fireman and a cop in the New York City subways, like when he was a cop in the late 80s. He was like 19 years old. Yeah. So the trauma isn't just from 9/11. It's from all his years as a cop and a fireman. But 9/11 was the icing on the cake that really set it off. So he didn't deal with that for 15 years. He didn't want to be put on medication. He was kind of just denying it. But he was still talking. He was talking to somebody. And then finally in 2016, I was like, you need to really do something more, about this. So he stepped it up a notch with some medication and stuff, but like that still didn't address the biological, the part in the brain, right? And so he did the EMDR. That was sort of, my therapist suggested that, and we were in marriage counseling, and he did that for about maybe 10 months or so, and that helped him, but it didn't get it all. There was still some like crumb. Like after you do a lot of healing and there's still some stuff left, I like to call it like crumb. He had some crumbs going on. So I said, you need to like do something else, because my kids were being affected. So even though, P.S., I'm doing all this work, doesn't mean that my kids are going to end up great, and I always laugh. I say, in 20 years or whatever, when they have their kids, they're going to be like, I can't believe mom did that. Mom. Even though I'm trying to do it like better.
Everybody's walking their own spiritual path, and maybe that's going to be part of theirs.
Every generation is supposed to do it better than the last. And just like we have more information and healing available to us now, they'll have even more. So how I'm doing things now is probably going to look like I'm doing it wrong compared to how they're going to do it when they're 30, 35, right? So when I told him he needed to do more healing, he found RRT, like you mentioned. And I wanted to talk about that because that life-changing, this RRT. So it's called rapid resolution therapy. It's a form of hypnotherapy. You're not out. It's not like you're getting sleepy, like a pendulum thing. Like it's not that kind of hypnosis. It's really just like a deep, deep meditation. And I did it as well. So that's why I can speak on to what it is. It's 3 sessions. That's why it's called rapid resolution. And it rewires your neural pathways. You can think your way into rewiring your pathways. But I don't know how long it would take to get the effect that he had. The first session, he came home like on cloud 9. He's like, I don't even know where I went. You don't know what happened. But I went to some other place and I'm back and I feel amazing. And so then he did 2 more sessions. He's been maintaining it too. It's the kind of stuff you got to maintain. He meditates every chance he can get. He is a different man. And I tell him all the time, I thank him all the time. I say, thank you for doing your work, because we would not still be together, because even though I had all my stuff and that I worked on and my heal, you know, he had to do his part too. That's why not all marriages are going to work out, even if you do this work. You know, work is not about saving marriages. It's about healing you, because even if the relationship is supposed to end, you're going to bring the same pain to the next relationship, and you're going to recreate the same, and use the word emotional abandonment. That speaks to the imago therapy that we did. So imago now means image. Jim had heard this speaker come to the counseling unit when he was working there through the fire department years ago, like in the early 2000s, before we even met. And he used to tell me randomly, like, oh, there's this guy, Harville Hendricks. And he came and he spoke to the fire department, and it's this really awesome concept. And I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, you know, whatever. And then when everything blew up with us and we asked our therapist, hey, do you know about this imago? She goes, yeah. She goes, I'm actually using some of those techniques with you guys, but I'm just not like calling it imago, but that's essentially what it is.
Okay.
So then COVID hit and we stopped going in person, and we didn't want to do online with her. I stayed online individually, but he didn't want to really do the Zoom. So she said, well, this is a good time. Why don't you guys do the workbook? So the book is called Getting the Love You Want, and the workbook comes with it. So every week we would force ourselves to meet and to do this work. It's essentially like the whole, like, you marry your father kind of thing that we talk about in psychology.
You marry their subconscious traits or certain dynamics within your family system, and you recreate them, I believe is how it happens.
100%. So, you know, we identified the things in each of our parents, mom and dad, that and our caretakers, or whoever takes care of you, those things that are lacking in them, you subconsciously realize, it's not at the surface, but you sense somewhere that your partner has those same shortcomings or lacks. They're lacking those same things. So the whole point of this is, and why we're drawn into partnership, is for healing. So when Jim says to me, I need you to be more patient or something, like, I'm just throwing something out there, like say one of his parents were like not patient. And then he says to me, you know, you're not patient, which I'm not. And that's probably why I threw that out there. But I need you to be more patient with me, or more compassionate, or, you know, whatever it is. And I say, okay, you know, I'm willing, you have to become willing. I'm willing to look at that and heal that part of me, to love you better, to serve our relationship better. I'm not doing it just for him or for the relationship. I'm essentially then healing that part of me that lacks patience or that lacks compassion. So that's why we're in these relationships that at some point, I feel like I say in the book, like 7 years, 8 years, 9 years of marriage, sometime you got a couple of kids, things aren't going so great, you don't have a lot of time for each other, whatever it is, you hit that like rough patch. And I think it's sort of a motivation, a soul motivation, if you will, like to do this kind of work to heal yourself. And then, but the byproduct is healing your relationship, because then you're bringing a more whole person to the relationship who can love with an open heart.
It's not about, hey, you need to fix this, and the other person saying, no, you need to fix this. It's how are we mirrors to each other? How can we fill in those gaps within ourselves? The byproduct is the marriage being well, or whatever needs to happen with the marriage. That's a very powerful place to start over.
Yeah, I remember when I was in therapy, when I was like convinced that we were going to get a divorce, like the first few months. And I remember telling her, you're not going to convince me to stay together. Like, I don't know what you're trying to do here. She goes, I'm not trying to do that, Amanda. Really? None of my business whether you stay together or not. My job is to help you heal and to bring you to the greatest sense of wholeness that you can. Will you give it a year? Just give it a year. See what happens. Do the work. Do your healing. And then if you still want to get divorced, go for it. Exactly. And I was willing enough. And I talk about my book too. The first 6 or 9 months that I was in it was really for my kids.
Right.
And thank God. Somebody told me, I remember when I was going through this, they said, sometimes the kids are the anchor. And I'm really grateful that I did that, because after 9 months or so, I just had this epiphany, this awakening that it was like, okay, I'm all in. I'm going to do whatever I got to do to see this thing through and to heal. And we're still healing. I mean, it's just like, and we're constantly growing and changing. There is no summit of personal development. There is no, I've arrived. I'm standing
no final point.
Yeah. There's no finish line here, people. And I believe even when we die and go to the afterlife, there's even more work to do then. And then we come back to do even more work. And so that is a good way that I give myself some compassion and grace, by saying I am a work in progress forever.
Right. And that opens up to looking at things from different perspectives, to work on the love, self-love and grace to evolve and never reach this elusive summit, because there doesn't really exist. There is a chapter in your book called The Holy Grail, and it's towards the end. There's a quote that says, "When old stories are revised, new messages hold the power to heal deep wounds." When old stories are revised, new messages hold the power to heal deep wounds. What is this Holy Grail?
I'm not telling anybody what to do in this book, and I'm not saying I have all of your answers. I'm just showing you how I did it, how it worked for me, the steps that I took. And if you can take one kernel from there and use it for your own healing, then I think I've done my job. But yeah, this Holy Grail about shifting your perspective, really revising the old stories, revising the narratives, right? We were talking about this recently on my podcast about the last episode about like, so instead of holding on to these old stories and reliving these old stories and compounding them and making them true, I think is who we are. Basically, the whole thing, right? I love this nice Nin quote. We see the world not as it is, but as we are.
As we are. Yeah.
And so whatever story I'm telling myself, I'm going to live out. I'm going to manifest that story, right? So if I can shift the old stories, if I can revise them, if I can create a new story out of what happened, instead of saying, oh, this happened and I'm blaming this one and this one hurt me, they screwed me over, they did this, they left me, da da da. Find a new empowering story to say, how did that pain serve me? How did it bring me to this healing? I would not have had the depths of healing that I've experienced so far if not for those painful experiences. Every single one of them. That's why I said before, I'm grateful for a lot of my pain, because I would have never chosen. I would have never chosen to do the work in 12-step recovery unless my life depended on it. Right? I'm not this like great human being that like is just so willing to jump into it. No, it's to save my life, really. Because if I don't do this work, I could drink again if my pain gets too great, and then I could die. So, but it doesn't have to be that serious for everybody. Like, just if you're in pain, you don't need to be in pain anymore. Like, it could be over today, and it's about the stories that you're telling yourself. It's all about what you're telling yourself. It's all happening in here. Yes, some of us, many of us have had horrific life experiences. Horrific. And I'm sorry that you've had to go through that. But now, how do you use that? How do you use that to then propel you forward and then heal and then help others? That to me is the key. Is this now being of service to others, like what you're doing on your show, Nina, and the book and my podcast and all this, all the beauty that people are making out there in the world, all our creativity, all the stuff that's happening is really spurred from a place of pain. So how can you use that to then help others? And that's going to get you out of your woe is me, pity sort of mentality. So yeah, go into the story. You got to be in it for a little bit. You got to do the work. You got to heal it. And then you use it. You shift it into something that's healing for others and yourself. Because then by helping others, you're still going to heal in the process. You keep healing.
I believe in the power of storytelling. I believe in the power of sharing your personal truth and your personal story, because the way that Amanda shares her story is going to connect the dots for somebody differently than when I share my story, than when somebody else shares their story. And they're all equally powerful. Your experience holds healing power and so much strength. But if nobody knows about it, then maybe you helped yourself, but they're in like that responsibility that you talked about, like paying it forward or making it available to the collective for somebody else who resonates with it to pick it up, and it helps them on their journey. So it's like this beautiful unfolding life and healing and love. With that said, have you seen all of your work manifesting for your family, for your life? Obviously, you and your husband are still together. Congratulations to you both and doing the work and making it work. How else have you seen that manifesting with the work that you do and with your family?
It's just more and more peaceful and serene, and the energy in our home gets better and better every day. Living where we live too in Colorado, nature, our house is surrounded by trees. We're like in a forest. Yes, that helps. We spend a lot more time together as a family. Being together in COVID, that whole time was great for us for bonding. We trust each other. I remember my therapist said once, I would get to like a good place with my husband, and then he would have some sort of experience, and then I would like backpedal, and then I'd be like back in the fear. And that still happens sometimes when he gets sick. But she said with his PTSD specifically, she said, you don't trust him enough that he's going to be good a while, because I get to this part where I'd be like all in and all that, and then like something would happen and it would crash down, and I'd be like, oh, I got to go back to like do this all over again. So I think we just trust each other to show up for each other more. Like he just broke a rib recently, which is like,
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah. He's been on a ton of pain, and he trusts me to not run away in fear, because when he would get sick, I would like close off. I'd shut down. I'd pull away in fear of future loss and sickness and whatever.
Right.
So I think we both trust each other a lot more now to show up for each other. Like when I would talk about things like, you know, over and over and over, certain family members or things that would happen, he'd be like, all right, he talks about it enough. Now he just listens. Now he's like, you know what? I'm not going to try and give you an answer. I'm just going to let you talk. So I trust him to be there for me more. He trusts me. My kids are thriving, doing awesome. We have a lot of music in our house. My husband plays guitar. My other daughter plays the flute. So we just always have music going. It's just lighter. And yeah, and I can get sometimes in a mood, or I can get
Sure.
roll, or I'm a human being, right? Or like, man, I don't want to wash this dish. I don't want to do this. We make it fun. We try to make it more fun. And we don't look at it as like drudgery. We look at it as we get to do this. We get to live this life. We get to be together for as long as we have together. I was just thinking about that this morning. I'm just going to be in as much joy and peace and happiness as I can for however many more years that we have together. You know, my husband's older than me. You'll see it if you read the book. But just more peace. And I feel personally just one step closer to whole. Like each time I do a show or my own show, or I write something, or I write my blog, or I put a post, I do whatever I do, I just feel like I'm one step closer to that purpose.
I love what you just said. One step closer to whole. That resonates and ripples out into places that we may not even know. So I love that you share that. I know that you have the award that is so exciting. So that's going to be in August.
Yeah, so the end of August is an award ceremony, so we'll see where I land on that. I have a few more. I might book into like 2 or 3 other awards to see like what else, you know, could come up for me. But right now I'm focusing on like speaking engagements. I actually had my first one a couple weeks ago, last week and a couple weeks ago. I have another one coming up in August in the town where I live. That's called Finding Belonging After Loss. So a few speakers are going to be talking about that. I'm organizing some local author events. I like people. I like being together. I used to call myself like a matchmaker. Like I put some of my friends and their husbands together. Like I co-founded that clubhouse with a bunch of people. Like I like bringing people together. So the speaking and the podcast and the connection is really like my jam. So I'm focusing on the speaking events. I'm focusing on my podcast. I love doing my show with my friend Jeannie, focusing on, you know, being on other people's podcasts just to spread the message as far and wide. And then when the kids go back to school, I'll have some more time. I'm probably going to flesh out like a workbook or some kind of workshop for this book.
That would be so useful. Yes. There's a lot that can be unpacked there. Yeah.
Yes. It's a memoir, but it's also personal development. So it's not just like me. There's teachings and lessons for the reader in there too. So I'm going to work on that. I have some book clubs also scheduled. So just getting it out there and bringing people together. That's really my mission.
You're already helping so many. I know your energy is just beautiful, and whoever gets to meet you benefits from all of the work that you've done, and hopefully you've received the same. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to link the book, your podcast, and your contact information. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you and maybe hire you for a speaking engagement or do a collaboration, they can go ahead and reach you there. What is your website so you can tell people where to reach you?
So my website's McCoy McCoy and Flanagan are spelled a little bit differently, so check out the notes. Yeah, Nina, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we connected, even though
Likewise.
Over a very painful experience for both of us, you know, and our brothers might be working some magic up there for us, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you for all the beautiful, wonderful things that you said, all the very humbled and flattered, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on your show and to reach some more people that might need this healing.
It's absolutely my pleasure. You're amazing. If you're listening to this, get her book. It is incredible. It's available via the link in the show notes. And just as a last goodbye, what would Amanda today say to Amanda 6 years ago?
6 years ago.
Or when you started this process.
Before all this whole thing started.
Yeah.
You are worthy. You are lovable, no matter what. You've always been. You've always been. The answers have always been inside of you. And I'm proud of you for finding the bravery and the courage to go in and find them and then to share them.
Perfectly stated. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Nina.
you.